MNCAA back with you for another segment for NCHC Hockey. It's Max Veech, Nick Maxson alongside with you. Week number 3 into college hockey approaching us here, Max. And when we get to this point in the season, I remember last year, St. Cloud State fans were in an absolute panic, which we don't have to worry about this year, which is good. UMD, again, sort of like, there's some, let's just say the foundation's been laid, right? And there's definitely some things to build upwards, which is good. A split on the weekend for your squad. And not to say that there were some things to work on, but there were definitely some more positives this weekend. We'll start by recapping this past weekend's games. You had to travel out east for this weekend. And I thought they looked pretty good.
Yeah. UMD's first road trip of the year, first one, or I guess the only one until, middle of November, a little bit after that, when we're starting to approach Thanksgiving. And I think they're just going to Miami for that one, if I'm not mistaken. And after that, it's just conference play for the rest of the year. So a little bit of growing to do for the guys, both together and, as a team on the ice. And we saw that in effect all weekend. I think obviously, personally, Friday's game went significantly better, which I enjoy, puts things onto a good foot where you're not panicking, but they weren't able to carry that same intensity into Saturday. But talking about the positives, we'll just talk about Friday in general. 4-2 win at Lowell. They at that point hadn't lost in that building as far as I'm aware ever, but at least under Sandelin. I didn't go all the way back in the history books and dig too deep, but that's what I was able to dig up. You're getting some, tough start again, which I don't like. I in fact really loathe the fact that UMD surrendered the first goal. It's becoming a trend that's a carryover from last year. I don't know what they need in order to get some of these games started a little bit faster, but gave that one up. Luckily, Joe Molinar, you're familiar with him, obviously. Provided a nice shorthanded goal and prevented Lowell from picking up any more steam. I was honestly a little bit shocked, and maybe you can speak to this a little bit. I didn't know Joe had that in his bag in terms of the moves he put on the goalie there. I thought he was more of a point and shoot type of guy. Has he always had that ability with his hands?
He has sneaky with especially the net front presence. I still remember back to the 2021 national championship run that St. Cloud came up short on. He was instrumental in that semifinal game against Mankato, showed those hands in tight. Now, granted, with St. Cloud State's lineup and just overall his game, the hands are there, but let's just say, the speed, shall we say, isn't explosive speed.
That's fair.
But at the end of the day, he's got some tools in the toolbox. And I think one of those is the hands. And again, it goes more unnoticed because he plays more of a bottom six role. And he played that same type of role under St. Cloud State's, leadership, helm essentially for the past couple of years. But being with that said, Max, he does have that in the tool bag, and he's great shorthanded on the penalty kill and can provide a spark in that bottom six when you need it. So at the end of it, he's always had that, but again, goes under the radar because of just the type of role that he's often given in the lineup.
Yeah. And I think we saw that penalty kill prowess, we'll call it, from him this weekend on a couple of different occasions, but specifically that one where you just pick up a pass that's coming across ice and get in front of it, and the anticipation and just familiarity with what people are going to do. That's going to come with his experience and how long he's been around the game. So love seeing that. Dom James getting on the score sheet. I thought he had one early. It ended up just trickling near the goal line. Cal Arnott ended up getting the official goal there. Love seeing him on the score sheet. Obviously, I think I expect that to continue moving forward. The thing I didn't love, and this was kind of foreshadowing, was the amount of penalties that UMD ended up taking in this game. 12 total. UMD was 0 for 6 on the power play. UMass Lowell was 0 for 4, so nobody doing a ton with the extra skater out there. But getting into some of these chippier games again, where it's just you feel like you have to survive. You feel like you're not able to get into any sort of a flow. You're not panicked, but it's just you're playing a different style of hockey than you've been training for the entire time. I know people, and specifically UMD and a lot of these squads have specific formations and what they like to do on the penalty kill, but I think more often than not, you're preparing for a 5-on-5 game, and that's what everybody would prefer to play. So
Mhm.
I would like to see a lot more of that. But I know I said we were going to talk about the positives. If we're going to talk about one of the biggest positives of that game, Adam Guyon getting his first official college action, comes out of there not with a shutout, but a 9.47 save percentage. Faced 38 shots, only let 2 in. Stood on his head a couple of different times. Bailed a couple of guys out on some high scoring opportunities, and looked good doing it. So no shock that he got the start again on Saturday there. Not as good of a showing, obviously, when you're going to give up 4 goals there, but still walked out with a 900 save percentage. So talking about where he's at on the year is still ahead of where the goaltenders were last season. Maybe not through 2 games, but where they finished the year. So if we start to or continue to see this type of play from him throughout the year, I'm assuming the defensive schemes are going to get a little bit better. I assume that we're going to face hopefully less shots. We'll see against Minnesota coming up here. More on that in just a minute. But um, it gives me confidence with him in net, and maybe we'll see somebody else after Saturday's game there. But I anticipate he'll be making the start on Friday, and the guys are very comfortable with him in there as well. They when they gave up some bad bodies in front or bad opportunities, they were the first ones to go up to him and say, hand up, that one's on me, not your fault. And I think that accountability is something that is going to help him grow and help the team grow as a whole as well. So love seeing that. But as far as the game script go, battled early, gave up the first goal again, couldn't recover. Thought the second period might turn things around. Um, UMass Lowell came back, scored in the first minute, and that was one of 3 goals in the next 8 minutes. So just not their night overall. You get, I think it was Carter Loney getting kicked out on another major, just frustration taking over and shadows of what we saw last year. And I hope that gets nipped in the bud because they've got a big one coming up. But
You don't want to compound, right?
right,
With and it's not to say that the emotions aren't warranted, right? I mean, I get it. It's frustrations, but it's frustrations from last year. Is where I think UMD would want to, like you said, nip it in the butt. They don't want to, take the same approach. Whereas, hey, yes, I get it, right? The bounces don't go your way. Maybe the calls aren't going your way, but you don't want to, make it harder on yourselves than it already is, right? With the things you can
right,
control. Now, to remind the fans that are out there, Adam Gayon, he's a freshman, right?
yeah,
So, I mean, he's got some unbelievable skill. There's no doubt. And we've talked about this ad nauseum year over year, Max, which is this time of the year, you're going to have the ups and downs. So you're going to have good performances. You're going to have some ones that maybe you're going to want to have back if you're a goaltender. Let's not forget that also the play in front of them. There's also players getting to, acquiesce with each other, right? So
yeah,
at the end of the day, you can't fully blame the goaltending. But
no,
like you said, you're showing shades of what he's capable of, which we knew coming in, right? There's the undeniable baseline of skill. It's just going to be put in all together, and then on a consistent basis is what's really next, right? Which is a good segue, right? Which is again, they got the Gophers next. I don't want to call it a measuring stick, but it kind of is, right? The Gophers in the top 5 in the country.
right,
Not to say that you would like the wins and there, not the losses, but for where these teams are at right now, I don't think you can look at it that way. I do
right.
think you just have to go out there, try to play a good, clean game. Maybe is maybe the better way to put it. Max, at least that's how I would view it. I don't know if you see it any differently.
No, I certainly don't see it any different, and it's going to be a learning experience. I think everybody kind of knew that coming into the season. It's not like he was bringing the Green Bay Gamblers or any of the other teams he was on to championships solo. It does rely on an entire team, and I think he is benefiting from a good quality squad that's only going to be able to get better. So, couple of tough shots there, bad bounces, things that were just trickling behind him for whatever reason. They gave up some turnovers in their own end, which is another thing from last year that's kind of showing up again. That I know Sandlin wants to clean up. He's mentioned that a couple of different times already. So they'll get there, and I have no doubts about that. It's just going to be having to learn pretty quickly here, given the upcoming schedule, but.
Yep.
Talking about schedules and roller coasters and kind of bouncing back and getting some more positive vibes going in the chat here. Let's talk about St. Cloud State and Bemidji this past weekend. I think the Huskies and everybody that's cheering for them had a lot of positives to look at in that series.
There were a lot of positives, Max, but I want to, before I talk on that, I do want to give a tip of the cap to Bemidji, man. They're solid. Calling the game on Friday, I loved the aggressive style. They flew all three forwards to the opposite blue line. They really gave St. Cloud fits in terms of how do I forecheck this, honestly, which is not something it's almost like the Beavers flipped the script on St. Cloud State a bit. And it really allowed their defensive core time and space, which is something that St. Cloud was trying to impose on them. But even then, when they did get their forecheck, meaning Bemidji, they really, really did go into the corners hard. St. Cloud State, really did not know, especially with some of the younger pieces there, how to handle, the lack of time and space that they had. I will give, though, the Huskies credit. They stuck with it. Again, Isaac Posh, also another, now sophomore goaltender, a younger goaltender is what I was going to say, right? I think he did bail out St. Cloud State on Friday quite a bit with his performance. Now, with that being said, speaking of freshmen, Austin Bernvik. That's all I got to say. 5 points on the weekend. Could have had a chance for a Hattie on Friday. Tried one for the open net. Didn't quite get it. But, the offense is there. The release is there. And showing shades of the player that got drafted in the 6th round by the Anaheim Ducks, man. That was nice to see. It really was the freshman that led it. And how about Thor Bufflin? Yeah, that last name should ring bells. Big name. Yes, it is the cousin of the former NHL defenseman Dustin. And let's just say that exchange play was the go-ahead goal with Barrett Hall. Just a nice little aerial feed. Thor coming down, just essentially doing an off exchange at the top there. You don't really see that high cycle play very often at this level just because of the risk that it takes. And you have to play it to perfection. Those two did it on the money, and Thor just taking the ice that was given. Probably didn't expect, that he was going to get essentially a red carpet to the slot, and then went forehand, backhand in a very Dustin Bufflin way. So that was nice. And then again, the travel. I mean, it's not terrible travel, but it's still travel, a home and home with Bemidji to go into their barn and to win another tight game. That to me is a lot of positives for St. Cloud State. Again, especially going back to last season. Granted, they tore Bemidji State apart respectively 6-1 both nights. Again, I want to tip my cap to the Beavers. They're not a pushover team. They're going to be competing at the top of the CCHA. Very upperclassman heavy roster that is getting scoring still up and down. Again, they weren't sitting back in that 1-3-1 trap as maybe they're historically known for. Last year, they sort of, I don't want to say they went away from it, but it wasn't that same
explored.
Style. They explored. They've continued that, and good for them, honestly. That style, the Jacques Lemaire style is, maybe, that's maybe coined for, and maybe not to be, not a fair coin. That is gone. That is gone. And I really think that that program needed that change. Granted, it takes personnel to be able to execute certain styles of play, right? And I think Tom Serratori and that group is doing a really, really good job with, especially losing Eric Polkamp again to Denver. You kind of wondered, okay, were they going to have to, dial it back a bit? No, they didn't dial it back at all. If anything, I think that the team this year is more balanced, and maybe they don't have the name recognition. Mind you, they lost 4 of their top 6 point scorers from last year. You wouldn't have thought that they missed a beat with how they play. So good battle between 2 good in-state rivals. Now it's going to be for St. Cloud State going on the road to Yost, and to make sure you're not taking them lightly. They didn't start great. The Wolverines did this year. But again, they're still a good hockey team at the end of the day. So I liked what I saw from St. Cloud, but there's still room to grow. The power play, a lot of new faces there, so that needs work. The PK is okay. I'd like to see some improvement there, but at the end of the day, not at all upset with the performance by a good hard-nosed club from Bemidji, which I think was a good time to have them. And I don't mean to ramble here, Max, but
No, no, no.
normally they get Bemidji at the holiday break, and that's sort
Yep.
of wake up. This is a good team to have them at that time because it's like, okay, they're going to come at us hard. They're going to bang bodies. That's been their style, and it still was. But I
Mhm.
think just after last season, and certainly with the non-conference record, and we know what happened for the pairwise, right? Which we'll touch here shortly. It's
Yeah,
still too early to really say that this is something to pay attention to, but also for St. Cloud, they're paying attention to it, right? Because
for sure.
you have to have the wins where they didn't have last year. So it was good. And I'm glad that they took them this early because I think it sets them up beautifully for the Wolverines and to know that, okay, we're in a rhythm now, hypothetically speaking, or maybe hyperbolically speaking is maybe the better way to say it. Can you tell it's been a hell of the last couple of days for me? I feel like my brain is fried, which I don't know if it ever is unfried anymore, but so I'm looking forward to that. But for UMD, Max, because I want to throw this back to you and
Sure.
maybe we can throw in some of the pairwise here with this. But at the end of the day, the Gophers have some weaknesses. They're
I
not
do.
a ton because this is a very good team on paper. Offense,
Right.
defense, the Gophers are number 5, number 6, depending on the poll you read. They're a good hockey team. But if there's some areas to exploit from them, why don't you go ahead and kind of lay it out for us? Because there's 2 specific areas that I think, one that's maybe a roster spot or area, and number
Yeah.
2 is maybe a point of attack, which, as Herb Brooks called it, you have to have the puck on your stick to do something with it. So why don't you go and lay it out for us?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Minnesota, decently good weekend. Not something that they're going to brag about by any means. Obviously, they didn't end up winning the icebreaker tournament, but they played well. I mean, they
Yeah.
showed out in both games, and I think that there's stuff to build on for them there. They're obviously a well respected hockey program nationally, but also within the state.
Yep.
Long standing rivalry with the Bulldogs that's kind of gone back and forth more so with UMD as of late. UMD last year only went one loss and one tie against them, so the Gophers had their number last year. But speaking of more recent events, they dominated Air Force as everybody kind of expected them to.
Yep.
In that Friday game, Connor Kurth with a hattie, Ryan Chesley had 2, I believe, in there as well, and then you get Matthew Wood everywhere. So the names that you expect to be kind of producing are there. Renzel was there. Snuggerud had got his name on the stat sheet as well. So the people that are supposed to be getting points for the Gophers are getting points for the Gophers. You're not getting, these nobodies coming up, which maybe you kind of want that against a team like Air Force to get some confidence in there. But you the old faithfuls are there and just playing like they should be. And I'm not saying any of them fell off in that second Omaha game, but you saw it in the Saturday game. It was a little bit more frustrating. They weren't able to get as many good looks as they were against Air Force, which again is probably to be expected. But they still put up north of 50 shots, 54, I believe it was, and they only had one go in, and the game went to overtime and they lost in overtime. Good for Omaha, bad for Minnesota, but that's still 54 shots that a goalie had to stop. And in college, we've seen people score from the corner behind the goal line before. Sometimes funny bounces happen. So um, high volume
That's
shots
just
here.
hockey
Like,
too, right? Like
yeah,
the quantity is not always about, or it's not always equates to quality or, that kind of thing. But, don't get me wrong, between you and I, we both know that the Gophers, especially with this roster, they were quality chances on,
yeah,
on that game. But I want you to continue to go with this because number one, and we'll talk big picture NCHC in a moment, but Omaha, man, starting to show why the preseason
yeah,
polls were as high as they were.
mhm,
Especially when you have a performance against Minnesota like this. Granted, again, asterisk small one, it's early, but at the end of the day, for the Gophers, right, it's a good way to sort of say, okay, yes, you've got the skill, yeah, you can dangle in a phone booth, but there's going to be different styles that you're going to have to sort of maybe win in a different way, and this was a good eye opener for them.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I thought it was strange with the goalie pairing that they went with Airy on Friday, and then they had Soulier on Saturday as well. Not that they needed to do something different, but they wanted to get looks for both of those guys and see who's
Mhm.
performing better. They're no strangers to swapping goalies out either. Typically they would like to stick with one if they're head and shoulders above the other, but
Right.
you're only one way to find that out, and that's to play them. So I don't know that they got all of their questions answered on that front either, but something that they are going to have a question about is their face-off percentage and who's going to be taking these big draws because they're struggling right now. I mean, they've got 44.8%. I'm not one to cast stones here. Hands up, like I'm sitting here in my class house from UMD's stats last year being around that same 46%. But they're not winning the face-offs. They're just winning the puck in the corners and those battles. And who's to say which one is the better one to be focusing on there? But when it comes down to some tighter competition where it's harder to get the puck away, I don't know how much they're going to want to rely on trying to bang bodies or have to outskate people to some of these. UMD on the other side of that is 55.8% at the dot this year, and Dominic James is at a 65% clip. So if he's out there, it's a threat that the Gophers are going to have to try and it's a puzzle piece that they're going to have to try and figure out. So that's one thing I think UMD is going to have to rely on is puck possession and winning those faceoffs if they're going to have to or want to kind of compete, because they're not going to put up as many shots as the Gophers are. I would love to say that they've got a chance to do it with some of the young talent that they have. They're not going to put up 50 shots. They're not going to put up probably 40 shots against that Gophers team. So they're going to have to play a little bit more puck control hockey. Neither one of them all that effective on power plays this year for whatever reason. Gophers 0 for 5. They've significantly smaller sample size there. UMD only 1 for 11. And they haven't played, world stoppers on the other sides of those contests either. So penalty kill, they're almost identical. The one edge I would give to the Gophers, other than obviously name recognition, but their cohesive rhythm that they seem to have from line to line. They can mix and match when guys are coming off the ice. You don't see as much of a hiccup. You don't see a sense of urgency, and I mean that in a negative way. That you do with UMD and some of these other squads that just haven't played together as much and might not be as familiar with where they're supposed to be immediately on the ice, just given the types of play that they're in. So credit to the Gophers in how they've been able to mix and match some of those guys and some of those lines in those different scenarios, because it seemed like it's been working out for them. And I see that continuing and something that UMD is going to have to focus on in terms of figuring out good matchups that they need to or can take advantage of, because there's going to be some where they're outmatched on a talent level. So they're going to have a higher effort in those situations. But
Yeah,
if you had some thoughts as to
I do.
where the weaknesses might be, I'd love to hear them too.
And mind you, it's not a weakness, right? Because this
Yeah.
team is good, right? But it's an area that you could exploit, right? Number one is the goaltending position. I
Yeah.
did get to watch both Airy and Soulier in that exhibition against St. Cloud State. And, and that's one thing for the Gophers that is, I don't want to call it a serious question mark, because again, if you're on this Gopher squad, you've earned your spot to be there, right? But
For sure.
these goaltenders in Airy and Sully are not just in close, right?
Right.
What I saw, and granted, it could be first game sort of nerves, it could be a multitude of different things, but they are prone to rebounds,
Yeah.
which also means that the Gophers have been packing the crease, which means they're trying to limit those second and third chances, which means it's going to be a bad. I think that's where you have to, to beat these goaltenders is to get traffic, but it's also going to be hard to get those pucks through, right? So you said a possession game. I agree with that. That also means that if you're going to play the low to high game, that puck has to get through that first layer. It can't be blocked. Because otherwise, as we know, one of the best transition teams in all of college hockey is the Golden Gophers, right? So
Yep.
the defenseman, if you're going to pick up that puck, from low to high, head's got to be up. And if you see that window, you have to be sure you can get that puck through. If it's blocked, if it's off a shin pad, the Gophers will come right back down your throat, and they usually have odd numbers if they do it. So I think that's one area that you can exploit the Gophers in, is the goaltending, because to me, there's still a pseudo question if you're a Gophers fan there between those two. They're seasoned goaltenders again, which is, good if you're a Gopher fan, but I think that there is a bit of a skill discrepancy there than there have been in years past. So I would tell you that. Number two would be, and I don't know if this is a fair thing for the Gophers, but there is skill on the blue line, but it's young, right? There is some youth there. And I think that you could, with a heavy forecheck, especially taking away the time and space with them. And if you finish your checks, I think that could frustrate. It was something that actually, with their decor last year, I think, early, that was something that hampered them a bit. They did figure it out, right? But I do think that you could impose the same type of system on the forecheck and just try to give them fits, right? The bad news is if you're not there in the right timing, right? If you're even a stride late, the Gophers again can efficiently come right back up the ice. And again, you're kind of caught behind the play. So it's a, I don't want to say risk reward, but you have to be able, the timing has to be there, is maybe the best way to throw it. So that would be my scouting report, unofficially unprofessional scouting report.
Seeing them cheat through the neutral zone always gives me a little bit of a nightmare scenario, because I saw it happen twice last year in the series that they played. And it's something that, Minnesota does almost better than anybody. And it's not that they're not cherry picking back there. They know when a certain player has it where they're supposed to be to get the fastest break and to take advantage of their position. And they just do it well. And it seems like on an instant, those guys are in the right spot and tape to tape passes. And I'm hoping that it's not as crisp next weekend, at least for 2 games, but we'll see for sure. You've got your own Big Ten matchup that you're trying to win in terms of the road trip that's out there.
And Michigan, and again, this is no disrespect to the Wolverines. To me, they're not the same talented roster as they have been in years past. Not to say they don't have talent, but they lost a lot to pro signings this past off season. In today's game of the big school hockey programs like Michigan, and granted, love the fact that they're back to relevance again. Let's be honest, as college hockey fans, right? But they're sort of on one of these, and it's a 1-year sort of downturn, right? They're still going to be a competitive squad, but are they a juggernaut? No. But with St. Cloud, you can't approach it any other way that they aren't a juggernaut, right? Because they still have a ton of talent up and down that lineup. You're playing in Yost, again, a historical building. So to me, you got to go down. You got to, like you said, puck possession, but more so you got to work it below the goal line. You kind of have to outwork them and wear them down because they can get frustrated. They're a team that can get frustrated. So I think you have to impose that emotions on them by just holding onto the puck, and more so, try to grind them down. And then again, trying to get those pucks to the danger areas and get the pucks to the sticks like Bernovic and Josh Lidke up top. Love what I've seen from Gavin Thorson already, too, another freshman out of Andover, who's been a pest, right? But a skillful pest, and he skates like a bat out of where. Werner Mietinen has picked right up off from his freshman season. He looks really solid in his sophomore year, especially at that center position. So there's some balance here with St. Cloud State in their top 9. We'll love and hope that Adam Ingram is in the lineup. He's not dressed yet because he had a lower body injury that he's been dealing with. Don't know his official status, but hoping that he can crack the lineup, because if he is, that top 9 is St. Cloud State in terms of the NCHC. I don't want to say it is as good as, say, Denver's or North Dakota's, but it's not that far behind them. And I do think that they do deserve to be in a top 3 spot. So, it's going to be an interesting battle, and especially, again, a good one on the road. I want to see them continue to play and get to that Brett Larson style, which is good, smart hockey, efficient out of their own zone. And then again, to get that puck deep, go chase. So should be good if they can stick to that. If you open the ice up with Michigan, that's not a winning formula. I think we all know that. but excited to see how they continue to go on this non-conference schedule and to continue to how do they approach this test, because it's going to be a test against the Wolverines. Real quickly here, Max, let's take a look at the conference as a whole, because overall, now let's put something out public there. I had a hot take before the season started, and it was concerning how certain teams in the NCHC would finish.
Right.
And I did not have Miami finishing last. I had somebody else finishing last. Granted, again, still early, but so far, Anthony Noreen, and I was very impressed with him at Media Day. He's got that squad looking much better. Now, granted, they started 4-0 last year, or 4-2 in non-conference too. And then when you get to conference play, again, the wheels kind of came off.
A lot harder.
It's a lot harder, but we're seeing a different Miami squad this year, and they've looked okay so far.
Yeah, when you're talking about them, it was the first series was Ferris State, correct? And those were both very tight games, and they fought hard, and it ended up being a good test for both squads there. And then this past weekend, not really. I wouldn't say it was a non-difficult task, but they showed out very, very well. Yeah, against Alaska Anchorage. That's an independent team. Not every conference is going to have that many teams playing independents. We've got Denver's already played Alaska. Miami's playing Alaska Anchorage. I think Denver actually played Alaska Anchorage as well. But
I think so too.
Regardless, they went out there. They were supposed to win the games. They won the games, and all credit to them. And Anthony Noreen, 2-0 on the weekend is nothing to kind of scoff at. And I would take that regardless. Anchorage is one of those teams that can surprise people. They beat Wisconsin last year. They had a handful of really good wins. I think they beat Penn State last year as well. So they'll rack them up when they'll rack them up when they least expect it, or when you least expect it. But they're not somebody that you can easily overlook. And credit to Miami, they didn't do that. And I think that Miami is going to be a significantly better team this year than they ended last year. And I might have criticized you a little bit for picking them not to finish last. But if they keep playing like they did, I'm not saying every result has to be a win, but if they keep playing like they did, I think they're going to be in a lot more close games late and have the opportunity for a puck to bounce their way or find themselves in a winning position. Whereas last year, it was few and far between when they were in those fights.
And that's well said, Max, because it may not translate to the wins just yet, right? We saw this very similar to Chris Mayotte when he took over Colorado College, right? You saw flashes, and then the next year it was more consistent, and then you saw the recruiting pick up, right? That was the big thing. And Anthony Noreen, before he essentially even played his first game, we saw that jump. There was already some recruits that came out and that were in the news, and we're like, okay, that's something that Bergeron just wasn't really able to tap into, and something that he was really brought on to do, right? Again, he had a really good record at Ferris State, and there was an expectation that he would continue that same train of success, and it just never translated. Noreen is a different type of coach, and I mean that in terms of his personality, his motivation, his overall, as the kids say, the vibes is much different. It's much more positive, honestly. And so I do think that he's going to bring that group together. And I do think you're going to see a very much improved Miami squad. Again, at the end of the season, we may look at the win-loss column. It may not be drastically different, but I do think we're going to come away with that team is playing much a better brand of hockey, and watch out next year. They're going to take another step, right? I think that's going to be the conversation at the end of it, but good to see they're having early not preseason, non-conference success. I'm still in NHL mode sometimes.
Their 08 recruits are, I don't want to call them scary, because there's certainly much bigger names than they've got, but they've got, I think, 7 or 8 of them right now that are, either nationally ranked, or I would say 3 of them are going to be future NHL draft picks for people that are, taking a shot on some of these kids. And, that's a leaps and bounds better than what they've seen in the last, we'll just say 4 or 5 years here. And again, not to take away from any of the talent that they've had there. They're all college hockey players. They all are playing at the highest level for that age group. And I think that it's something to be proud of, but I think you're absolutely right. And then, this being the first step of a couple that they're going to take in the next 2-3 years.
100%. So let's stick with NCHC train. So Miami, again, nice, good showing for them. Let's move on. Omaha, again, 2-0 in the icebreaker. Again, Omaha continues to be impressive at times, right? And this is the thing with Omaha is that can they essentially show it weekend after weekend? Again, they're not looked at as being this high skill, flashy, type team, but they've got skill players, they've got playmakers on their squad. I think that in terms of the balance, maybe some of the more balanced rosters I've seen with them. And if you can take the Gophers into a low scoring sort of, it's got to be a work in the corners type game, that's a battle that Omaha generally wins. And so nice to see them, again, go up against a really good opponent in the Gophers and keep it low scoring as they did.
2 ranked wins, one against Hockey East, one against Big Ten, 2 of the teams that we thought are going to put at least 3, if not 4 teams into the national tournament at the end of the year. That's boding well for them and for the NCHC's, pairwise rankings, just because they're going to play each other so much throughout the year as well. So I hate to say I'm rooting for Omaha because that makes it a lot tougher for either of our squads to kind of jump them in the national rankings. But it's good for the conference, so I'm all for it.
Yeah, great group of dudes, and love Gabinet as a coach. He's a great human being too. Love chatting with him when I get the chance to. Colorado College, again, 2-0 on the weekend, 1 win in overtime, but who cares, right?
Who cares?
It's still a win, right? At the end of the day, I know that it's math will math differently, but we'll see.
I have a hot take about that. I am nearly convinced that Noah Laba and we'll just say I'm nearly convinced that the coaching staff is forcing these games to go into overtime. They're saying, just hold the puck, eat it, whatever. We want Noah to get this overtime goal record because he is on his way. If he continues on the pace he was last year, this year, and it seems like he is, he's going to have, 20 overtime goals by the time his college career is done. And it's insane. And he just keeps doing it, which good for him. But
he's nasty.
It would be kind of crazy as a Colorado College fan to know, we're going into overtime. Give it the puck to Noah. We're going to win the game.
Win the draw and give it to him. Could you imagine playing backyard puck with him? That would just be unfair. You never get to touch the puck. He's darn skilled. North Dakota, again, just a 1-game set over Providence this weekend, although a very good matchup between those two. Providence, another good ranked team coming into this last weekend. Arizona State, again, we talked before, not the best weekend from the 0-1-1 against the Wolverines. Again, it's not something that you want, but again, Michigan is a good squad, so it's not the worst. And again, Arizona State, they've been playing Big Ten schedules over the past couple of seasons in preparation to join the NCHC. So it's early. Again, Arizona State, they'll learn from it. And then last but not least, Western Michigan 2-0 over Ferris State. Again, that's on paper a matchup that the Broncos should have taken care of business on. But as you mentioned with Miami, you still got to play the 60 minutes of hockey in 2 nights. They did it. And Western Michigan looking good early.
Yep, absolutely. There's 2 teams that I was, confused of how to rank. Omaha being one of them, hand up. We'll see. Probably overlooked them a little bit again this year. I thought last year they maybe overproduced given what they've got. They're well on their way to being in the same position they were last year, and maybe they can win one of those NCAA playoff games and make a run. But Western Michigan, wasn't sure if they were going to be able to produce. Again, it seemed like they lost a ton of their front end scoring, and they just seem to be chugging along like they normally do. So
they're reloading.
It's going to be another difficult year in the NCHC, and everybody on the planet, maybe not everybody on the planet, every college hockey fan in America likes to say that, the media and the polls and everybody else kind of favors the NCHC because they, just happen to win titles and this, that, and the other thing. They're dominating the primer for what's going to feed the pairwise later on and kind of determine these spots. And that's where you get, these 500 teams that are in the NCHC being over a team like Arizona State last year that played a significantly weaker schedule against teams that just didn't really win all that many games in the first 4 or 5 weeks here. So the uneducated ones are going to have a hard time figuring out why some of these teams that are closer to 500 in the NCHC are getting those national rankings again. But I'm just going to point back to specifically maybe this weekend, because there's a lot of big wins
Yeah.
in here that I think are going to be quality and impact that significantly later on.
And I'm going to leave you with this caveat here, Max, because you bring up a point indirectly, and that is we've had good showings from this conference in non-conference so far.
Yep.
But here's the problem. We probably, I would say we both agree that Denver and North Dakota are probably in your top tier of the NCHC.
1A, 1B. Yep.
1A, 1B. No disrespect to anybody else, but that's just where they're at, right? However, there seems to be, when you look beyond that and above, respectively, again, Miami and Arizona State, a bunch of teams that you could place anywhere from 6 to 3.
Yep.
And that's setting up for at least college hockey fans quite the NCHC conference schedule to see how this all shakes out. But are you ever concerned as an NCHC aficionado? I think we both are in that boat. That do we beat the crap out of each other too much? And although these non-conference games certainly are important for the pairwise at the end of the season, but with it being so good of a conference, is there a chance that, you know, maybe we take too much out of ourselves before we get to the big dance?
That's certainly a possibility. What I will say is this is the first year in a long time where there's an extra team, maybe the first year, that really matters for a conference of our size. We went from 8 to 9, Arizona State being in here. If everybody here, you know, wins the same amount of games as they did last year against the same opponents, and then they all sweep Arizona State, that's not going to happen. If they did, you know, theoretically, your records are all going to be a little bit improved. Your winning percentage is going to be a little bit higher. Maybe you see a St. Cloud State or a Colorado College or one of these teams that barely missed out last year make it because they had a win against one of those other teams that was, you know, a little bit harder to get a win because they were playing at Denver or North Dakota last year. I don't know what my direction on that was going, other than to try and lead into, I still think 5 teams from the NCHC are going to make the poll or make the tournament again at the end of the year. That might be a stretch given what we saw last year with a couple of really close teams missing out. I think that it's going to be another one of those seasons where we get maybe 2 number 1 seeds and then 2 2s or a 2 and a 3, and it's everybody looking again at the end of the year like, how do they keep doing it over and over and over again? But the talent in this conference is something that I think everybody kind of relishes and should be appreciating right now, because the other conferences are getting significantly better. Your Big Ten, I'm shocked they haven't won a national championship yet with all of the NHL names that have come out of there, with all the scoring that's there. They've had incredible goaltenders, but they keep seeming to drop these insignificant games. Wisconsin struggling with Lindenwood, Michigan State, despite beating BC, they struggled with Lake Superior State. I don't know, you know, their non-conference schedule isn't helping them, so they need to make it to the big dance before they can win it, and that might be some of the things where the NCHC is exceeding where the other ones just aren't getting there. So the opportunity for the NCHC teams to win those championships has been higher because they're winning these non-conference games. So I think that's to their benefit, regardless of how the you know, in-conference season goes.
And I think from both of our eyes, and we'll end on this note, is although maybe to the naked eye, right, you know, these teams, it's a war every single weekend when we get to conference play. It's great for the entertainment eyes, but the reality is it actually helps, right? It prepares you, because you're essentially playing playoff hockey from essentially November 1st until March, right? You essentially can't take a night off. That's something that Arizona State's going to figure out really, really quick. I think, you know, once they get into conference play, and it's not a disrespect or a knock on them. You have to go through, you know, what do you call it? The initiation season, you know, you just have to jump in, and it's going to be a bit of an eye opener for them. So I do think they're going to struggle, just in the sense of, I don't think they've played quality opponent after quality opponent after quality opponent this many times consecutively. Now could they surprise us? 100%. Yes, they still have talent there. And granted, you know, if you look down their recruiting pipeline, Max, they've got some good names that are, you know, at least saying that they're going to head towards, the Sun Devils. And I think even more so once they start seeing how this conference is, it's only going to attract more good talent to the Sun Devils roster. But with that being said, Max, the previews, so UMD gets Minnesota, St. Cloud State on the road against the Wolverines. So some pretty important early non-conference games for both of our squads as we try to get things settled in. So that will do it here for this week's take on the NCHC. For Max Veech, I'm Nick Maxson. We'll see you back here next week, guys. Thanks so much.